All right, well, thank you guys for coming out today. Normally, we're sitting in the honors conference room, like over pizza and salad and stuff. So it's a close runner-up to at least be able to do this experience virtually with you guys. And as Rex mentioned, we've been doing this for a number of years now. And if you don't know, again, my name's Luke. I'm with the undergraduate admissions office at UCF. I oversee our National Merit and National Hispanic programs here. So I see some familiar faces, or I guess names, I should say, join today. And we recognize that a lot of you guys as honor students, probably a good chance that the majority, if not all of you guys, have earned some type of scholarship to come to UCF then. And, you know, I spend a good amount of time when National Merit Scholars come to UCF trying to just reiterate points of how their scholarship works, what it can and can't do, and just trying to provide words of caution so that they don't run into any problems and they have a smooth experience with their merit scholarships over the next couple of years while they're in their college careers then. And so what we're going to cover today is kind of reiterate what most of the points are for a majority of your merit scholarships and help you kind of learn some tactics and interacting with various offices on campus, and also try to avoid any potential pitfalls then where you can run into problems, which is always definitely what we want to try to avoid then. If you have any questions as you go along, like Rex mentioned, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm glad to make this more conversational and ask anything that comes up as we go along then. So let's go ahead, we'll get started with the PowerPoint, but how can you keep your scholarship at UCF? And a couple things to keep in mind about our scholarships is there are a lot of them for incoming freshmen then. So we have just 10 alone for students that are from Florida, and then 12 non-Florida merit scholarships then. And there's a lot of varying awards out there, a lot of different requirements for each of them. But I just always like to point that out because a lot of you guys don't realize that the scholarship you have may be vastly different from 2 or 3 or even 4 of the other students that are participating in this session today. So scholarships come in all different awards and styles, and we'll try and get into a little bit more detail about that. Now, those awards I mentioned don't include things like Bright Futures. So if you are a Florida resident, you probably were familiar with Bright Futures and are probably qualifying for it right now. And then again, a different category than even need-based financial aid. So if you qualified for any form of a Pell Grant or an unsubsidized loan or subsidized loan, work-study program, those are all forms of need-based financial aid that may have different rules to go along with them then. So it's complicated with any kind of financial aid package because it's not just about your merit scholarship, but it's about all these other forms of aid that you got then too that may have different rules that you have to go by. It's confusing. I do this for a living and it's confusing for me. And so let's kind of cover some common points that will help you guys as you go along. Now, most of you guys are probably on some type of Pegasus scholarship. The Pegasus Scholarship is any kind of scholarship that's awarded by undergraduate admissions and funded by UCF then, right? So those include like the Pegasus Gold, Pegasus Silver, Pegasus Bronze, Provost, National Hispanic. Those are all Pegasus awards, right? Even though, you know, a lot of you go, well, wait, Pegasus, I'm National Hispanic or something. That's not, Pegasus isn't even in that title. And Pegasus Awards are just kind of that umbrella of awards that my office provides to you guys as incoming students then. For the majority of you guys, the minimum, if not all of you, the minimum GPA that you have to maintain is a 3.0 UCF GPA. Now, keep in mind that a UCF cumulative GPA is different than a cumulative GPA. They're not one and the same. So a cumulative GPA is going to include any kind of dual enrolled coursework that you earned in high school as well. But for scholarship purposes, we're only going to be looking at a 3.0 cumulative UCF GPA. So this is only going to include grades that you earned while as a student at UCF then. Now, for many of you, you realize that your total package and your total aid package cannot exceed your cost of attendance category. I know I hammer this home a lot with the National Merit students, but I've had other students run into problems before. I remember a provost scholar coming to meet with me a couple of years ago. She had gotten very aggressive and gone after a lot of scholarships from her college, from different departments around campus, different private awards. And she kept stacking these awards thinking, oh man, I'm just raking in all this money, not realizing that financial aid was going to cap the amount of awards that she was eligible for. And obviously she was upset because she spent a lot of time writing essays and submitting for different awards and going through an application process to receive that. So just keep that in mind that you guys cannot stack awards that exceed your cost of attendance category. And cost of attendance, again, just kind of like that rough estimate that UCF uses then to come up with what they think a typical UCF's cost would be to attend our university then. Now, for all of you guys that are here, obviously you have to be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen. That's not really much of an issue for many of you guys, but is a requirement for our financial aid office. Now, financial aid will review you for your scholarship renewals at the conclusion of each spring semester. Now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but the reason I point that out is because right now we're in the fall semester at UCF. And every year, without fail, I will always hear from students in late December or early January when the spring semester resumes. And they're like, oh my gosh, like I got below a 3.0 for the fall. My scholarship is gone. And for a UCF merit scholarship, that's not necessarily the case because you guys are renewed or made eligible in 2 semester increments then, right? For the fall and the spring. It's only at the end of the spring semester that financial aid will go and see if they're going to renew you for an additional 2 semesters then. Now, each semester also has components to it that you have to maintain to maintain your scholarship as well. You do have to be enrolled full-time, which remember is 12 credit hours or more. So you can't be like a part-time student or withdraw from a class or something like that. We'll get to that in a second too. But it does require you to maintain full-time status by the conclusion of the drop add period then. And then I mentioned before that at the end of the spring semester, they're going to also check you for that UCF cumulative GPA then as well, right? Now, you are each made eligible for up to 8 semesters of funding or really kind of like 4 years then, so to speak. And so as long as you keep meeting those renewal requirements, you can keep earning your scholarship over the course of the 4 years then. Now, I know I hammer this home a lot with the National Merit students. If you're on the Benequisto Scholarship, remember you have that added provision that you cannot withdraw from a class after the drop add period. You can't earn a grade of NC, W, or WF. And I spend a lot of time with you guys making you aware. Again, just to kind of reiterate that Benequisto is not a UCF scholarship. We facilitate the scholarship, but it's actually handled through the state of Florida. And that just kind of points to a bigger pattern that you'll see emerge is that different areas aren't always overseen, or different awards aren't always overseen directly by UCF. Sometimes a private donor or the state of Florida, if we're talking about Benequisto or Bright Futures, they craft and create and maintain the rules for all these scholarships. And so we don't always have the purview to be able to make exceptions or alter a policy or anything, because we don't control that process then.
Looks like we have a question, Luke. Polita?
Yes.
Yeah, when you said that scholarships are renewed on a 2-term basis, was that just Pegasus or other things also like Bright Futures?
No, great question. So yeah, so in many cases that will be for Bright Futures as well, that they do not check for renewal at the end of the spring or at the end of every semester. For Bright Futures, they will check for renewal at the end of the spring semester then as well. Yeah, great question, Pauline.
Okay, also, does that mean that it's not like exactly 2 terms? Because after the spring term is also summer, so they wouldn't check again after fall, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that the Bright Futures eligibility for the summer has only been around for what, like maybe like 2 or 3 years now. The state of Florida flip-flops back and forth. They'll offer it, and they won't offer it. And now we flip-flop back the other way that they're offering Bright Futures over the summer again right now. But to answer your question, they will renew you for the fall semester then. But typically, if I remember correctly, financial aid will check to see that you meet eligibility requirements at the end of spring if you're trying to get it for the summer semester then as well.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think Luke, I don't think that they look at it over summer. I believe that's what.
Do they make students eligible automatically?
Right. Well, in other words, they only look at it at the end of spring. So
Yeah.
just like all the other scholarships. So it's not every couple of terms. They review everything at the end of spring. From what Alicia told me most recently.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. And thanks for clarifying that, Rex. Yeah. The other thing I'll point out about renewal requirements is they are constantly evolving. Then they change all the time, and we try to keep your advisors up to date in the academic colleges. We try to keep your honors advisors up to date about things that are changing, but they are different because we are trying to see what works and what doesn't work for merit scholarships. And so policies may change even from year to year. And so I make you guys aware of that because one of the things I find you guys like to do is you kind of like to talk amongst yourselves sometimes instead of seeking out professional or advice from financial aid or maybe from your honors advisors. You'll ask your fellow students like, hey, how did this work for you? How did you make this work? And sometimes you guys get hung up because somebody that is a year or two ahead of you may have a different requirement that is not applicable to you then, or vice versa. And so it can cause some confusion sometimes because you guys are seeking out advice from your peers, which may be accurate for their particular situation, but not necessarily for yours. And so just keep that in mind. I always encourage you guys, if you have questions about renewal requirements, always talk to a staff person, right? So don't go in a chat group or, Facebook or something and, hey guys, how did this work? Because they may not be aware of different policies that are going down and being altered or changed from year to year. And that's what your advisors are here to, and financial aid is here to do, to kind of best advise you then. Okay, so helpful hints as you are students here at UCF is one is always check for holds and to-dos on your My UCF account. And Rex and I at the beginning of this phone call were actually just chatting because I've been working with a lot of honor students for holds that they have for final records. And here we are, it's like the middle of October and we're still, fussing with a lot of students doing roll transcripts or AP scores or ACE Cambridge scores. Check for holds because you always want to try to have those cleaned up sooner rather than later then. The same thing goes for your to-dos. Now, not all items on your to-do list can have an impact on your financial aid or registration. It's kind of a case-by-case thing, but the more you can try to be up to date with those and not have any of those items, the better off you'll be then. Now, if you ever reach out to financial aid and you have questions, be sure to ask about each individual award that you're using then, right? So I see this a lot. And in fact, we just had an appeals meeting this morning that I was participating in over the financial aid office. And one of the things I see come up frequently is that students may go by the financial aid office in person or, call them or something. And they may say, hey, I have a question about my Pegasus scholarship. Does it work like this? And they go, yeah, actually it does. And the student goes, great. What they didn't realize is that what they were seeking to do doesn't apply to Bright Futures, or it doesn't apply if they're on the Pell Grant, or it doesn't apply if they're on a different award then. You think, oh, I just want to ask about my scholarship. But you have to be very careful and ask about different requirements for different awards then. So if you ever have questions, maybe you're thinking about doing a study abroad. Maybe you think you want to try to do an internship or a co-op program, and you want to know, how does that work with my scholarship? Be sure to itemize each award that you're earning to ask, are these the requirements for Bright Futures? What about for my Pegasus scholarship or Benequisto scholarship? What about for my Pell Grant? And that way, the financial aid person can pull up each of your individual awards. You know, my financial aid colleagues, man, you know, this is a perfect example, right? So as much as I work with scholarship students and all these things, they get inundated with questions like Bright Futures and how does that work for summer? And it's hard for me to keep track of that sometimes. And sometimes it's hard for them too. So the more that you can ask about each individual award, the better off that you'll be. The other thing I always give advice to is be sure to keep records of conversations when inquiring with departments on campus. And this is kind of just a good general rule of thumb, that, you know, if you're reaching out to your academic advisor in your college, financial aid, maybe even my undergraduate admissions office, you always want to ask who, hey, I reached out to undergraduate admissions on September 15th, and I spoke with Ashley over there. And to summarize our conversation, this is what we had, right? Because you always want to be able to reference that later then. I can't tell you how many conversations I will have with students, and they will say, well, I spoke to somebody in your office. And I'll say, well, I'm sorry, that was really bad information you got. Here's the correct information. And they'll say, well, why would this person have shared this with me? And I'm like, I don't know. Who was the person that you were speaking with? And they go, I don't know, it was some lady. I've got 50 females in my office that I work with, and it could be any one of them that you're speaking with. So the more that you can document your conversations, and be polite about it. You know, I have people ask me all the time, you know, hi, you know, my name's Luke and I have questions about X, Y, and Z. Who am I speaking with right now? It's okay. Yeah, sure. You're speaking with, you know, Rex in honors advising. We're glad to answer that for you guys. And so, but the more you can document it, the more, if anything goes wrong, you'll have some form of recourse then to at least say, yeah, I spoke with this person in your office. That kind of points to another thing is the more that you can try to obtain things in writing when confirming things through various offices on campus, that's also a really good thing to do as well. Because sometimes with verbal conversations, people call again and say, well, I spoke to somebody. Oh, okay, you know, the more you can get things in writing from people, especially when it comes to financial matters like your merit scholarships, just a rule of thumb, it's a really good thing to have. So while going by an office in person is a really great resource, calling offices on campus is a really great resource. I always say the really best way to document that is through email conversations then. So you know, just a little advice about trying to keep a track of any time you reach out to any of us. And before you make any sudden action or you move forward with trying to complete any kind of study abroad, internship, or co-op, talk to your advisor first, right? So, you know, Rex and his team have a really great knowledge base. They're able to kind of, you know, at least steer you in the right direction of who you need to go talk to on campus if they don't know that. And so I always encourage you guys. And in fact, a lot of the time when people reach out to me like, hey, does it work this way for my scholarship? I'll say, yes, it does. But you may also want to reach out to honors advising just to confirm that there's nothing else that withdrawing from that class may impact or something like that. So always talk to your advisor first before you take any drastic actions. So this kind of section is what I always like to point out are common mistakes I see, and I tried to make them a little comical and humorous because it kind of will lighten up. But I do see a lot of these come up frequently then, right? So first one is what I talked to you guys earlier about. I asked my friend about dropping a class and they did, and it was fine. Well, what's wrong with that statement right there? Well, they went and they talked to their friend, and I actually had this happen. I had two roommates that one was on this kind of award where they could drop a class, and one was on this award where they could not drop or withdraw from a class. They didn't realize that, and they went ahead and took that action, and man, it really kind of screwed up their scholarship then. So don't always just seek peer advice. While they're great, when it comes to, you know, hey, did you take that class from that faculty member? What did you think? Great advice to get from your students, right? But hey, will I lose my scholarship if I do this? Not great advice to take from your peers. So seek us out or honors advising if you have questions about that. Just always cautious about advising you guys to only talk to your peers though. Oh, here's one that comes up a lot. So in many cases, you guys will try to do an internship or maybe study abroad over the fall or spring, and you will miss enrollment for an entire semester. And what you guys often don't realize is that if you break enrollment, you have to request ahead of time to get an exception made for you to not be enrolled over fall, spring, fall, spring, fall, spring. So I will hear, I thought it'd be okay to miss this spring semester. I didn't know I needed to submit an appeal ahead of time to maintain my scholarship. How do I get an exception made for me? And for those students that this occurs for, in many cases, if they do it after the fact, they may be penalized. They may lose a semester of eligibility. So instead of having 5 more semesters of eligibility, we may reinstate their award through the appeals committee, but only give them eligibility for 4 more then. Whereby if they had asked ahead of time, they would still have 5 semesters of scholarship available to them. So just keep that in mind, that you always need to reach out ahead of time, especially if you're doing any of those like study abroad, internship, or co-op projects. And I see this come up frequently, and I'm sure Rex probably sees this occasionally too, because you know, you guys also have requirements to maintain good standing in the honors college too. I know my GPA was a 2.997, but shouldn't that be close enough? Don't you guys round up? That's ridiculous. That 3.0 is required, and I was that close. You just should give it to me. And I would say with financial aid, there's not a lot of gray space when it comes to financial aid. It's much more of a black and white situation where they have to adhere to policies crafted, and they're not always at liberty just to carve out exceptions easily and readily. So keep that in mind, you know, that if the renewal GPA is a 3.0, it's a 3.0 that you've got to have then. If not, it doesn't mean you can't appeal to try to get your scholarship back should you lose it or for any other reason. But when you can avoid the appeal altogether, obviously that's the best set of circumstances. And yeah, UCF, we do not round up when it comes to scholarship renewals. Here's one that comes up a lot, and we see this a lot right now for students that were taking classes back in the spring due to COVID, or maybe in the fall semester, even right now. They may end up using grade forgiveness and trying to retake a class, and they will say, I used grade forgiveness and I didn't know I had to make up those hours. My GPA is a 3.4 though, so I'm not worried. And we will have a lot of students that will and here's a good example, right? So maybe they took organic chemistry 8 for the fall semester, and they're going to take organic chemistry 8 for the spring semester because they got an F in the class or a D in the class for the fall. And they take a very light schedule for the spring because they want to really focus on that. What happens when they get a B in the class at the end of spring and they use grade forgiveness? That credit that they earned for the fall kind of in a sense goes away now. And remember, part of maintaining your scholarship isn't just the GPA alone, but it's being enrolled full-time and earning 24 credits by the end of every spring semester. So that's where they get hung up, is because they will have only earned 22 or maybe even 23 credits by the end of the spring semester because they exercise their grade forgiveness. Now, honors advising, fully versed and aware of that. Financial aid is, but many of you guys don't realize that going through when you use a grade forgiveness then. And I've seen students do grade forgiveness with a 3.98 GPA before, funny enough. But even though that student has an amazing GPA, if you don't have those 24 credit hours, then they're not going to automatically renew you for your merit scholarship then. Other common mistakes. Man, I get this a lot, and I am constantly nagging. I know any of the students I work with directly on this. I probably got an email from financial aid, but I didn't read it. Knight's Mail is our link from a professional standpoint at UCF to you, right? So when you guys enrolled in classes, your kind of standard email or default email address became your Knight's Mail address then. So that's when any notifications about your housing or financial aid or holds or events or anything, people are going to reach out to you through a Knight's Mail account. And I hope that all of you have gotten in a good habit of regularly checking your Knight's Mail. I believe, if I remember correctly, Knight's Mail has like a spam folder too. If that's the case, please make it a regular habit to check your spam folder too. Probably a lot of you guys have like Gmail addresses. I've always told my students, Gmail hates anything from UCF. And in even some cases, Knight's Mail sometimes will send stuff from UCF to a spam folder too. So make it a regular habit, go through your spam mail on occasion, but also regularly read any emails that you get. And I get it. You guys get inundated with tons of communications from various departments about this or that. Another common one that I see come up with is housing. Ugh. Man, housing will send you guys these emails and it's like, it's super long. And you guys kind of read the first paragraph and then you're like, meh, you kind of tune the rest out then. Take the time, go through, read the full email. I always give the example, it could be at the bottom. The first person to click on this gets $1,000 at the very bottom. If you don't read it, you're going to miss out on that. Now, is that likely to happen? Probably not. But it just goes to show you that you do want to thoroughly read any emails that are coming through because there may be information pertainable to you even at the bottom and end of that email then. So just keep that in mind. This kind of goes back to earlier what I was saying about those like in-person or verbal conversations. Well, financial aid told me all I needed was a 2.5 GPA. Well, that may be the case for Bright Futures, but not the case for your merit scholarship then. And then you guys will come back and I say, well, who did you speak with? I don't know. Well, when did you go into their office? I don't remember. Again, that's where it's key to kind of document these things if you do reach out and ask questions, because it's really important to know all of that. In this student situation, The Bright Futures requirement was true for maybe what financial aid communicated to them, but not applicable for their Pegasus Scholarship then, or National Hispanic, or even Provost Award. This is something that I think is becoming more and more common now. I see from a lot more students, especially you guys being a member of the Honors College. A lot of you guys were in your high schools, and I always kind of say a lot of things that happen at your high school are beg forgiveness rather than ask for permission, right? So I'm just going to move forward and do this, and I think that's right. And it wasn't right. Well, how do I get this reinstated? Who do I need to talk to? Who can make this exception for me and change this? And I know from my standpoint, I've seen this, you know, in my, I'm not even going to say how long I've been doing college admissions now, because it's sad and crazy that I'm this old. But that has become more and more what I hear from students, right? I need an exception made. I need this corrected. I need this changed. And again, financial aid may not always have that ability just to go in and snap their fingers and make that happen for you then. So that kind of just reiterates the point I made earlier about always ask permission rather than beg for forgiveness then, right? Just remember, exceptions can't always be made about everything 100% of the time, right? So you kind of, as you get into college, have to get into that mentality of, we are like, I always say it's like a mini government or city government or state government at UCF. We have a bureaucracy going on where there are layers and forms and processes and procedures and regulations from all these different areas across the university. And as much as we want to support you guys, we will not always have that ability then to just make exceptions for you then, all right? So the more you can adhere to the standard procedure, the regular process, the easier it will be for you then. I hear this a lot too, and in fact, we honestly just had one of these situations come up from a financial aid scholarship appeal this morning. The student said, my organic chemistry 2 class was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Are any of us shocked that organic chemistry 2 might be a difficult class? No. We know what the difficult courses are at UCF. Another student this morning appealed and said, I didn't realize that taking, man, they had a ridiculous schedule. It was like statics, they were engineering. It was like statics and differential equations and physics 2. And they were like, I had no idea these courses would be this hard combined. And the engineering advisor was like, anybody in my office could have told you that. We get it. There are some hard courses out there, but struggling in them and not meeting renewal requirements doesn't mean it's an excuse then if you need an exception or appeal made for a scholarship. And that's something that I would say the appeals committee just is not as forgiving over, because you know, we understand that there are going to be difficult courses out there, but the expectation when you earn these merit scholarships is it's kind of like a contract. We have recruited you with these merit scholarships to UCF. Now it's your job to come in and perform well in your classes then to maintain that contract that was signed between us. So this brings up my biggest tip, and which I already mentioned to you, is always think about asking for permission. You want to do that program. You want to do that internship. You want to do study abroad. Those are great opportunities then to start asking now. How will this impact my enrollment? How will this impact the sequence of courses that I have to take for my major? How will this impact my financial aid? And then maybe not just financial aid. How will it impact my Bright Futures? How will it impact my Pegasus scholarship? How will it impact my Pell Grant then? these are questions to start getting the answers to in advance, right? But don't just charge forward, get a charge on, charge forward, you know, and then later on say, well, nobody told me. Because something that we don't have the ability at UCF is to go in and review every student for every semester and see, hey, I went in and checked. I see that you're making an error by doing this. You need to fix it, right? Now, if you reach out to us, we can tell you what the errors potentially could be, but we can't always go through and review that ahead of time for every student. It's part of kind of like a large university environment like we enjoy at UCF then. So there's perks and there's drawbacks to a large university, and that's definitely one of the drawbacks. So always ask for permission rather than beg for forgiveness. All right. So that kind of wraps up the formal portion of my PowerPoint presentation then. And we have a few minutes. I'd be glad to try to answer questions between Rex and myself that came up during the conversation.
Great. Yeah. Again, so if you do have a question, go ahead and click on the raised hand feature at the bottom under participants. We would be happy to handle those. See if we have any questions.
You guys are a quiet group. Normally we're like eating pizza and drinking Diet Pepsi.
They're bombarding us with questions too, which is completely fine. Oh, look, we have one. Eric, we'll go ahead and yeah, Eric.
It's a bit of a short one. So if the they calculate the requirements for your scholarships in spring, so you can't have below a 3 in spring. Like even if you're above a 3 in fall, but then you do a little worse in spring, is there any like leniency on that or no?
No, great question. Yeah. So if you guys, after the fall semester, you know, let's say you get a 2.95, it doesn't mean all hope is lost for your merit scholarship. Because you now know for the spring semester what you will need to try to get to maintain your 3.0 then, right? But it's only at the conclusion of the spring semester that financial aid will check you for renewal then. It's not at each semester of eligibility then.
Right. So just to clarify, they'll look to see your cumulative GPA like in May, basically.
Yeah.
How you're doing. Your cumulative UCF GPA in the case of the UCF scholarships. So yeah. So either way, if you did, you know, not so great in fall and you do better in spring, then you might be okay. And same thing, vice versa, because they're going to look at your cumulative UCF GPA.
And it's even trickier for the Benequisto/National Merit students because this drives me crazy with my financial aid counterparts every year, but their renewals typically don't go through until like the middle of August. And I'm sitting here like, we got to post these renewals, guys. And it takes them a long time because they have to get clearance from the state on each of the renewals. And that takes time too then. So it's a very cumbersome process, especially for those.
It's like we have Anna or Anna.
Anna. I was just wanting to clarify. I know you guys touched on it, but so regardless of whether you're taking a summer semester or not, your grade is just reviewed at the end of spring?
It is for Bright Futures for sure. I did check my email on that, and that is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good
Polina?
question so far.
So if your GPA is above a 3.0 in fall, but it drops below 3.0 after spring, then it won't be renewed. Your scholarship won't be renewed.
Now, remember, it's going to be the cumulative GPA, not just the semester by semester. So you don't have to have a 3.0 for the fall and a 3.0 for the spring. It's going to be whatever your cumulative GPA is between all of your grades and courses for the fall and spring that they will use.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Oh, hey, Charlotte. Yeah. With the minimum, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, for Benequisto students, then it's now the 3.0 cumulative. So is what we're using. Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions? Okay, if we don't have any others, I'm going to go ahead and put the survey again in the chat. So if you didn't get it before, you have it now. So if you'd fill that out before you leave, that would be great. And if you'd go ahead and take yourself off mute again, let's go ahead and give Luke a round of applause for that wonderful presentation. Very good. Yes, feel free to clap, you know. Yeah, you can use the virtual clap. That's even better. Either way is just fine. But again, thanks again for coming. And if you have any other questions, is there a way they can contact you, Luke, or what should they do?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can always just send me an email, Luke V as in Victor, Luke V at ucf.edu.
Luke V at ucf.edu. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, very good. All right, got a lot of thank yous in the chat. Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys.
Again, thank you for coming and for filling out that survey for us. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.